Hello YouTube, welcome to another one of my videos. I'm going to make a track with the Elektron Octatrack, the Elektron Analog Rhythm and the Elektron Analog 4. So, in this one I started out with a vocal loop. Okay, it's been sliced up and I'm just busy playing the slices for shits and giggles. And the next thing is I'm going to create a bunch of trigs and then do a linear lock to get all the trigs playing. Here we go. Ha, thank God that's over. Right, I've also got a hi-hat loop that's been sliced up and dropping that in the track, and again apply the linear locks to get the samples to play on the right trigs. Okay, quite like the sound of that. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is add in a drum loop. I got a bunch of breaks on my SD card, and I'm going to add a break from the sample library. Okay, let's audition some of these breaks and see which one might fit well in the track. I'm kind of looking for something with mainly drums, but possibly some guitar as well. Nope, not that one. Definitely not that one. Too slow. Maybe. Maybe not. Nope. Ah, that's the one. Okay, so this part I'm just slicing it up and moving all the slice points so that it fits nicely. Okay, I gotta tweak all the slice points now so that it loops without too many clicks and pops. I will try and forward through some of the boring bits so that you stay awake. Some of these bits can be tedious, but they're very necessary. Okay, so I've decided that this is a 2-bar loop, but I only want to use 1 bar, and I'm going to use the first of the 2 bars. So I'm just mucking about with the time signature to shorten the loop down to 1 bar. But then what I've done is copy the first bar over to the second bar. So in actual fact I did end up with a 2-bar loop, but it's 2 bars of the first bar copied, if that makes any sense. Hopefully. And I'm just mucking about with some of the trigs, replacing some of them here and there, just so that I get a nice sounding loop. And that is pretty much it. Yep, happy with that. Okay, now time to tweak the filters a little bit so that the various loops sit well together in the mix. Okay, so far so good. Now let's get some drums going from the analog rhythm. Okay, so I'm going to layer a sample snare on top of the analog snare from the rhythm. Okay, snare sounding cool. I'm going to add another snare in there, and I'm going to use a conditional trig so that it only plays once every second or third bar. Little tip, if you're choosing a snare sample, remember to press yes after you've chosen it, otherwise it bloody well forgets to load it in, doesn't it? Okay, now let's get a kick drum going. No, do not want 4 to the floor. Okay, let's get the compressor going on these drums. Not happy with this kick drum, needs a bit more work. Let's silence the other instruments. So I'm going to mute some of the tracks on the octave track and then just have a listen to this kick drum. Better. Now let's tweak the pattern a little bit. Much better. Time for a few more conditional trig tricks. Okay, I'm happy with the kick and the snare. Let's get some sizzle going. Okay, in this section I'm just trying to find a sampled hi-hat to layer over the analog hi-hat from the analog rhythm. I think it's kind of a cool thing to do, to be able to layer samples over the analog sounds. In this instance I'm just trying to find a short, crisp hi-hat to accentuate the attack phase of the hi-hat, just to make the Analog 4's analog hi-hat stand out more. to add some closed hi-hats just to improve the rhythm of the hi-hats. Closed hi-hats I find are the thing that really helps accentuate the groove in a track. Adding a few more tweaks to the kick drum and the snare. What I often do with the snare drum is change the decay time of the first or the second snare to just give it a bit more feel. In this instance, because I'm using a sampled snare, I've changed the end of the sample just to give it to make one slightly shorter and one slightly longer. Right, I'm pretty happy with the rhythm tracks, and now it's time to move on to the bass line. Right, just trying to find out what the key of this guitar sample is, so I can match the bass line to the key of the guitar. Sometimes this is an iterative process where you've either got to tweak the pitch of the samples you're using to match the bass line you're writing, or vice versa, get the bass line to sit into the key that the rest of the track is in. Okay, so it turns out that the vocal sample, the vocal loop sample I'm using, is in a different key to the guitar loop. So I'm going to have to make arrangements here to accommodate them. So what I'm going to do is probably tweak the vocal sample later on to sit in the right key and make the bass line sit in the key of the existing guitar loop. Man, does that make sense? Hope so. Okay, I've worked out what the key is, and now I'm going to have to write an actual bass line. It's probably going to be pretty simple because the drum beat is pretty busy. So for now, just a simple bass line to get things moving. Kind of got to decide whether this is going to be a 1-bar bass line or a 2-bar bass line or 3 or 4. Let's see. Okay, I think this is definitely going to be a 2-bar loop, so let's change the track scale to be 2 bars long. What I like to do in almost all of my songs is have a different pattern length for each track. So on the Analog 4, if you go into the scale menu, you could choose in the advanced setting to have a different master pattern length than the individual pattern length. So you can have like one pattern that's say 12 steps, another is 32, another is 64, etc, etc. I'm just trying to work out a fill for the end of the bass line, which is why it's sounding a little wonky at the moment. I haven't actually recorded it in yet, but bear with me. nearly there with this fill. First bit I recorded in was a bit out of time because I haven't set up any quantizing, so let's give it another go. Okay, so I've got the basic notes of the bass line in. Just manually going to add in some extra trigs to accentuate the downstroke, the downbeats of the bass line. Okay, that's pretty much it. The only thing it's missing now is a little bit of swing, just so it fits properly in with the rest of the track. Okay, pretty happy with the bass line. Now you'll probably notice that I used a preset. Yes, I do. I use presets. What the hell? But generally, no preset will ever fit perfectly in with your song. So there is a certain amount of tweaking that you have to do just to make it sit right. Now that might be messing around with the filter so that you get the right brightness, or you know, you suppress the brightness with the filter cut off. It also very much revolves around tweaking the envelope of the sound, and that could be the amp envelope or the filter envelope, just so that it sits nicely with the song. It's pretty much a given if you're going to use presets that you're going to have to do some tweaking. Okay, I've brought back in the vocal loop, and as I mentioned previously, it is not sitting in keys, so I'm going to have to tweak the pitch of the vocal loop so that it sits properly with the rest of the track. Pitching it up didn't work, it sounded too much like fucking chipmunks, so pitched it down, and that seems to have done the trick. That is now in key. Okay, what I'm doing now is just setting up one scene on the Octatrack. Kind of the way I tend to do this is I sort of jam the song while writing it, because if it jams well, it will sound good at the end of the day. I think it's just, that's how I write. I need to be able to play this at the end of the day, so setting up a scene just so that I can sort of do transitions, if you like, or fill transitions at the ends of bars, just to see how it sounds, and if I'm feeling the groove or not. Okay, with this scene I am going to set up an LFO, a random LFO, to modulate the sample start time of the loop. Because it's a slice loop, it'll actually modulate the slice, so it'll play a random slice when I trigger that scene. You'll hear this all over in some of the songs I do. More setting up stuff for jamming. I am creating a performance on the Analog 4 for the bass line. To tweak the filter cutoff, just working out that it's filter 2 that's applying most of the brightness control over the filter. So once I've figured out the right settings that I want to modulate, I'm then going to go into performance mode and set up a performance for the bass line. Wobbly, awesome. Okay, when you're setting up performances, I recommend that the very first thing you do is name them. Because if you set up a whole bunch of performances for a song, by the time you get to the end of writing it, you're like, what the hell was performance A, B, C, or D? Name them before you set them up. It'll really help, promise you. For this performance, I am going to modulate the filter envelope and the filter cutoff a little bit, and also a little bit of send to the reverb, just a tiny little bit. Okay, now I'm going to try and find a lead sound. So I've decided I want like an arpeggiated type lead sound for this song. So I'm going to find a basic sound to start the arpeggio off. Oh, that one was quite nice. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to use one of the coolest features that the Elektron Analog 4 has, and that's the ability to lock different sounds to the steps of the sequencer. It's not a very difficult thing to do. If you go into the sound menu and you go to the sound manager, you can find sounds that you like, and then if you push the right button, it'll take you into a little menu where you can say to copy the sounds into the sound pool. Once the sounds are in the sound pool, you can lock them to a step by holding in that step and turning the track level knob, and it will lock that step. So you could actually have, say you've got a 16 step pattern, you could have a different sound on each step. So for this particular song, I'm going to have maybe 3 or 4 different sounds, all arpeggiated, but there'll be one main sound and like 3 or 4 different other sounds forming the lead. So it'll be not just one lead sound, but like 4 or 5 different lead sounds. Okay, this bit actually took quite long, so I think we'll probably cut out about 10 minutes of the video if we forward this bit. Here we go. Okay, now that the lead sound is all set up, I'm gonna look for some effects. So probably reverb or delay. Got to see which sounds best with it. I do think the reverb on the Analog 4 sounds really lush, so I tend to use that quite a lot. But maybe I'll use delay this time. I don't know. We'll see. Now I'm going to set up a snare drum fill on the analog rhythm. I want like a quick rolling snare drum sound that happens at the end of the pattern. Right, that's the fill, but I'm going to use conditional trigs, the fill conditional trig, such that it won't play normally and I have to hold in the fill button to trigger the fill. Okay, all going well. Now I want to add just a few more drum sounds. Decided I'm going to add a clap sound. Might vary it between having one sort of clap somewhere in the loop and another clap only coming in with a fill. Changed my mind, not going to use the clap during the fill, but I am going to set two different conditional trigs on the two clap trigs, so they'll play at different times. One might be like 1-3 and the other say 2-3 or 3-3 or 1-4, basically so that the claps play at different times during the loop. So we're like nearly half an hour into the video and you've been listening to the same groove over and over and over again all this time. Is it driving you mad yet? Well, I'm sure if you're like me, you know that that's exactly how you write music. You've listened to the same loop over and over again, and because it's your music, you don't get bored of it. That's also why I'm talking through this bit, just to keep you entertained. I'm setting up a scene on the analog rhythm here, so I'm doing stuff like assigning various envelope parameters to the scene, so shortening the envelope so the drum sounds are much shorter. I often tend to pitch the different sounds in the scene, and also in this particular one I've shortened the snare drum, pitched it down and sent it to the reverb so that it just sounds a bit more roomy during the scene. Yep, another example of jam as you write, so introducing some of the scene from the octatrack, some of the performance from the analog 4, and of course the scene from the analog rhythm. Things are coming along nicely. What I want now is some sort of a rising sound that I can use in fills and transitions. So I'm gonna sculpt a sound from scratch. Maybe just to show you that I can, maybe because this is the sort of sound I find easy to program. So basically it's just a bunch of pulse width modulation on the two oscillators, and then I'm going to use the envelopes to do a long slow rise of the pitch mod, and then probably also some LFO just to make the sound interesting on both the filter and maybe on the pitch mod. Let's see how it sounds. That is the sort of thing I'm looking for, but it is not quite interesting enough yet, so more tweaking is required. Sound ends too abruptly, so tweaking the amp envelope, the release of the amp envelope, so that when I let go of the note it fades out a little bit as opposed to just abruptly cutting off. A little bit too in your face, so I'm gonna use the same envelope and modulate the filter cutoff so that it slowly becomes brighter over time, as well as the pitch rising. Introducing a little bit of LFO to further make the sound wobble as it increases in pitch. I'm going to use the second LFO to modulate the speed of the first LFO so that the wobbling, the frequency of the wobbling rises and falls. Adding a little bit of the same LFO to the balance so that it modulates the panning left and right, and then I think finally some effects, probably some reverb. Okay, you've just sat through 5 minutes of me designing a sound. There's 5 minutes of your life you're never getting back. Okay, so obviously we don't want that sound to play continuously through the track, so the answer again is conditional trigs, and it is fill conditional trig again. So in the same way that I had the snare drum fill set up that it'll only trigger when I hold in the fill button, similarly this sound I only want to happen when I trigger the sound with a fill. Now I need a crash cymbal. The stock cymbals on the analog rhythm are pretty shit, so it's time for a sample. Okay, that is the sound I want, and Now to get it into the sequencer, guess what I'm going to do? Go on, have a guess. No. Conditional trigs again? Absolutely. This one's going to be probably a 1/8, so that it only triggers once every 8 repetitions. So I've just worked out that my actual bassline pattern is wrong. Bar 1 is where bar 2 is, and bar 2 is where bar 1 should be. So it's like, I don't know how the fuck I managed that, but fear not, it's pretty easy to rectify. You just have to hold in function and the left or the right keys, and you can shift the entire pattern forwards or backwards by however many you want to. So I've just shifted the entire pattern forwards by 16 steps, and now it's exactly as it should be. I'm sure you can appreciate this is just a constant process of tweaking. I decided the drum mix wasn't quite right, so I'm just tweaking the snare drum, the kick drum, and there we go. So at this point I think the pattern was grooving along quite nicely. I've got a drum pattern I'm happy with, I've got a bass sound I'm fairly happy with, I got a lead sound that's quite interesting, I've got some transitions, some fills, all sorts of good stuff happening. And I sort of now need to take a bit of time to reflect, and I'm basically trying to decide, have I got enough elements in the track or not? I really think that it probably needs something more, maybe a pad, because that always helps to fill the space, and I do like a good vocal sample. So at this point in time I stopped the cameras, I went and had something to eat, and came back and recorded in some more stuff, and this is what it sounds like now. In this next section, which is quite a long section to be fair, so I'll probably cut some of it out or speed it up, move it along. So I'm setting up scenes. I like to use scenes to bring parts in, take parts out, which is effectively the same as muting things. On the amp page of the Octatrack, there's a volume controller which you can set to maximum or minimum, which will, as it suggests, mute the entire part or set it to full volume. I'll also use scenes to tweak things like the filter on certain parts, so I might bring parts in, instead of bringing them in full whack, I'll use the filter to filter out either the top end or the bottom end of certain parts, and then open it up a little bit in the next scene, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And then also scenes that I'm going to use as fills, so where I completely cut out the bottom end of the track or the top end of the track, and all sorts of other things. Another popular favorite of mine is to automate the LFOs on the Octatrack. As you've seen previously in this video, I like to use LFOs to tweak the sample start of a sliced up loop, which gives you a nice random effect of the loop, so you get random triggers, especially when you've got parts that have snippets of vocal in them or snippets of guitars, things like that. To randomize those patterns, I find creates a very interesting effect. So there's probably about 10 minutes worth of setting up scenes here that I'm going to quickly forward through, because you will really get bored of the loop if I don't. Moving over to the analog rhythm, I'm going to set up some scenes here. On the analog 4, the scenes I'm using are again things like filters on the various drum sounds, tweaking the pitch to pitch things up or down, tweaking the envelopes to shorten the sounds. What else? Also sending various drum sounds to the effects, so maybe a bit of reverb or delay on various drum sounds. Let's let this play a bit. Okay, so as not to bore you to death, I'm going to forward this bit, lots and lots of tweaking to set up these scenes, and then when that's done, we're going to move over to setting up a few performances. So in case you didn't know, performances on the analog rhythm are similar to scenes in that you lock parameters to the pads, but as opposed to scenes where you just hit the pad and all the parameters instantly change, with performances you hold the pad in, and the harder you hold the pad in, the more of the modulation is applied to the sounds. In this particular one, I think I'm using things like bit reduction on the snare drum, again closing envelopes on kick drums, tweaking the pitch of the hi-hats. So in the end of the day, I'm going to be able to have a modulation effect that I can use in a fill to slowly crush the sound and tweak the pitch of various other drum sounds. Hopefully by the time I finish this, you'll be able to hear what it sounds like. Okay, that is some performances set up. Have you stayed with me all this time? You've been watching for 45 minutes if you have. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your support. Around about now it's a good time to save. So I'm going to save all my parts, my patterns, my kits and my projects. Okay, so now everything's been saved and everything's cool. What I'm doing now, because basically all this time we've been working with one pattern, so I'm now going to take that pattern and copy it to another 3 patterns. So I'll effectively have the same pattern on 4 different patterns, because the next thing I'm going to then do is go through each of those patterns and slowly build up the sound. So I'll probably start off with things like on the analog 4, I'll change various of the initial patterns. So let's say I have 4 patterns. I'm going to use those 4 patterns to progress through the song, where the first pattern will have less of the parts in it, the second will have a few more, the third will have a few more, and finally the 4th pattern will be the entire song. So at the moment what you can see I'm doing on the analog 4 is going into the lead part and taking out various notes so that there's only a very small part of the lead playing. I then will do a similar thing on the analog rhythm, where I'll take out some of, for instance, take out some of the hi-hats, so effectively skinnying down the patterns. apart from actually removing certain trigs from the sequence, I'm also using conditional trigs, once again, to set certain steps in the pattern to play less frequently. So I'll use a conditional trig like 1 in 8 to play only on the first bar of every 8 repetitions, or for instance for the fill on the bass line, I set it so that it only occurs at the end of every 8th cycle. By this time I've pretty much got all the parts, patterns, scenes, performances, all the different patterns themselves are getting tweaked so that they flow nicely from one to the other, and it kind of helps to jam this out at this stage so that when you're doing transitions, making changes between patterns, you'll know that everything is flowing and that everything sits just right. And we're nearly at the end. Right, so this process of tweaking continues on for about another 10 minutes. I speeded all that up and cut some of it out so as not to bore you to death again. If you've watched all the way, all 1 hour of this, can't believe it's gone on that long. There was originally 2 hours of footage here, which I've cut down to an hour. Hopefully it didn't bore the pants off you. Hopefully you learned something from this. If you did, I'd really appreciate a like and a share. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. And if you use any of these machines, send me links to your music and your songs. I'd love to hear what you do with these machines. I think they're a fantastic trio of instruments, and I must admit I've never had as much fun making music as I have with these things. They are fantastic. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.